Howdy! How's all my friends out there in YouTube land today? We are going to be working a little bit with the Quikwood. Anybody ever use this stuff? I used this a long time ago, and when I was shopping over there on Thanksgiving on Miriam Joy's website, it's miriamjoy.com, she had this on there. And I thought, oh, that was always a lot of fun to play with. And I thought this would be something I could do some videos on, because there's a lot of different ways you can use this stuff. Now, it says here on the tube of it that it's Quikwood, and it says that, well, it's got a lot of foreign speak on there, but let's see, we'll get to the part where it's in English where I can actually read it. It says you can rebuild stripped screw holes, nail holes, scratches, gouges, cracks, dry rot, knot holes, carpenter bee damage, and more. And you can reshape handles, knobs, carvings, and then it goes on underneath that label there to what all you can do with it. But I mean, that gives you the basic gist of what it says. And now this comes in a tube, and we'll get it shook out here, and it's in a round roll, and it's covered in plastic. And what you got to do with that is you got to cut that. And what I do is I take the plastic loose from it, because you don't want to form that with the plastic on it. And it don't take a whole lot of this, but what I'm going to do is make some embellishments out of it today and use it in my silicone molds. So I pulled some silicone molds out here. I've got some oak leaves, I've got a little anole lizard, I've got a dragonfly, and I got a rose. And I thought that I would use those to make some embellishments. And we're just going to cut a piece of that off of there. And then we're going to push that back into the tube and put the cap on it, because you do not want this stuff to dry out. If it dries out, it ain't no count to use. So we'll just sit that to the back there. And then you got to work this just like Play-Doh. Well, we got the little end plastic thing on there. We don't want that on it. We'll get that peeled loose. I mashed the stuff right to it real good. So we'll get that peeled off there and lay that to the side. Now, let's see, it's got a white inside and it's got a tan outside, and it all has to be one color when you get done messing with it, because if it's not all one color, it's not mixed. So you do it just like you would Play-Doh or Fimo or Sculpey or whatever kind of clay you're messing with, and just keep molding it around itself, squishing it one way and squishing it another way, mixing it up. And you don't want to see any marbling. You want it to be all one color when you get done. And I'll rub it between my hands, get it a little warmer to work with it here. I try not to shake the table too much, because I got the table leaning up against the little camera tripod thing, and that's what makes shaky city in here. So we'll try to keep the arms off the table, and see, it's all getting to be one color there now. There's no marbling showing up in it, and it's real pliable like chewing gum. And then you take your mold. I'm going to use this in this rose mold, I think. And you're going to mash it in there. Just mash it in real good. And I try to get it so that it's up there at the edges of the thing. There's not going to be a lot of trimming to do on it. Mash it down in there so that it gets in all the nooks and crannies and really forms the design on it. Now, depending upon what you're going to put it on, depends on how you want the back of it to be. If you're going to put it on something flat, you know, book cover or whatever package or what have you, you're going to put it on, then you want the back of it to be pretty flat. So once you get it in the mold, peel it out of there. Well, maybe you will, maybe you won't. When I mash it in good. Try to peel it without it messing up on me. Yeah, this one's going to mess up. And that's not unheard of. When you first start doing it, you mess them up. Clean out the mold a little bit here. Sometimes it takes a time or two to get it just right, but that's the nice thing about working with this stuff, is that it's forgiving. It's forgiving until it sets up. When it sets up, it's like wood. When it sets up, you can sand it, paint it, whatever you want to do with it. Now we'll try meshing that in there again. See if I can get it out. Form the rows. Might need to just let it sit in there a minute so it starts to set up before I try to peel it out. I don't want it to get totally hard, but because when I take it out of there, then I'm going to put it on the flat surface and mesh the back of it down so that it is flat on the back. Just trying to see if it'll start to let go a little bit on its own here without me having to pry at it. Now it's going to need to sit in there, so let's just push that in there and let it sit for a few minutes while I mold some of these other ones up. And the closer you can get it to the edge of the actual mold in there, the better off you're going to be when it comes trimming time. If you don't like to do a lot of trimming. And if you ended up with too much, that's okay, because you just use that in another mold. Add a little bit to it if you need to. And I'm going to get some more out of the tube here so that I can work on some of these other ones while we're waiting for the rows to set up a little bit. We'll peel a little of that plastic back off of there. There we go. I'll cut a chunk loose. Pull that plastic back up over it. Put it back in the tube and put the cap back on. And then we'll go to work on this piece. Just like Play-Doh or clay or whatever, you just keep working it, warming it up. The warmer it is and the more pliable it'll become. So you just keep working with it. I see a little dust inside that mold. We'll knock that out of there because we don't need a dusty mold to mess with. It still needs a little more mixing. See a little bit of the white shining through it, so we'll mix that up. One of the good things that I found that this will work for is if you're working on one of the gourds, if you've watched any of my gourd videos, if you happen to be working on one and you crack it, or you make a hole where you didn't want a hole on it with your engraver or your Dremel or your drill or whatever, you decide you didn't want that hole there, you can fill it in with this Quikwood and sand it off nice and smooth, and nobody even knows that it's been patched. If you're working on a woodworking project, it's really cool for your woodworking projects. Okay, now let's try this leaf right here. We'll mash that down into the mold. Make sure that we get it up there at the edge of the design. Save a lot of work down the line. Now, you see that this is domed up over the back of this. Maybe you can see it. It's kind of domed up. And we don't really want it domed up there on the back, so I'm going to trim that down with the knife so there's not as much on there, and we'll save that piece for the next one that we're going to do. Cut that down just a little bit more there off the top of it. So it's easier to work with it now than when it gets hard. While it's soft, it's forgiving, so we'll let that work for us. And there again, that's going to have to set up a little bit more. It's too pliable to get out of the mold just yet. Now let's check on our rose over here and see if it's ready. And I don't think so. I think it's going to have to set a little bit longer. But it is starting to firm up some. Well, let's pull it out and take a look at it just to see what we got here. And I think it's going to have to go back into the mold. So let's push it back in there. It's still soft enough that it'll form right on back in there. So we'll push it on in the nooks and crannies in that mold. Leave it alone. It's telling me to leave it alone. All right, I got it. And we'll take our little piece of wood putty that we got left here, and we'll get it warm again. It's already mixed up. We just want to warm it up a little bit, make it a little more pliable going into that mold. We got our little dragonfly over here. So he's not very deep. It won't take too much to fill him up. We push that down into the mold. Well, it's starting to set because it's sticking to me. Good grief. I feel like Brer Rabbit and the Tar Baby. I need a little oil on my hands. It's getting sticky. Well, I don't think that piece is going to work in there like that. Come on, warm up. Okay, now, let's see if that's a little bit better. Remember when we used to play with silly putty when we were kids, and you used to take the silly putty and you used to push it on the funny paper, on comic strips or funny papers, whatever you used to call them, and make an impression of that comic on the silly putty? That's what this is reminding me of. But silly putty was still flexible after you took it off the paper. This won't be. Once we take this off of here, it's going to be firmed up. Push it out to the edges. Make sure it's pushed down into the mold. Try to trim it back off a little bit so it's not going to be such a pain in the neck to trim when it comes off of there. All right, that's setting up pretty firm right there. We got 3 molds filled out of the 5 that we got because there's an extra leaf here to do, and we got our Anole lizard. You're doing Southwest designs, those lizards are cool to put on. Paint them different colors. Okay, we're going to get another piece of our Quikwood. Take the knife and chop another piece off of there if we can. Peel it. Well, that's some tough plastic it's got on there. All right, Peel that loose, stick it back in the tube, and put the cap on it. Now, we got this chunk right here. And we'll peel the paper off of that, put that in the trash, and we got our piece that we're going to warm up. You are only limited in these embellishments by the type of silicone molds that you have. I've got a lot more silicone molds, but I thought this would be a nice little embellishment piece to show a selection of what you can do with this Quikwood. Miriam Joy's got this stuff on sale on her website right now. You buy 3 tubes and get 1 free. So you need to hop on over there and get you some of this if you want to work with it. She's got some silicone molds over there too. We just keep working and moving it, get it all combined, mixed up. Don't want to see any white in it. You want it all to be one color when you get done. And so now I've been mixing on that for a while, and I don't know if you can tell, but it's just marbled. It's not mixed up good. If it's not mixed up good, it's not going to form right. So you got to mix the bejeebers out of it. Make sure that you got it mixed up good. Okay, let's flatten that out a little bit and take a look at it. That's looking good right there. It's all one color. I can pull it apart and not see any white pieces or anything in it. So that's looking good right there. All right, we'll take a piece of that off of there, and let's go to our little lizard down here and push that into our lizard mold. If you put a little oil on your hands when you're working with this, it keeps it from sticking to your hands. You don't want to saturate yourself, you know, and then have it all mixed up in your putty. But, you know, just coat your hands a little bit. Vegetable spray, Pam, just spray a little bit of that on your hand. And I didn't think to bring that in here when I got started with this. Hindsight's 20/20. We'll peel some of that off the sides of the mold. Let the little lizard go to setting up. Be nice probably if I keep this in the camera view so you could actually see me doing this, but I think everybody can figure out how to push some clay down in a mold. Just pull the excess pieces there off the sides of it. Just keep it over here in my little clump. I've got a little clump that I'm working with, and that'll be mixed up for the leaf we're going to do next. You don't want to see any pieces of your mold just sticking out there, you know, that don't have anything pushed down in it. So a little place right there. We'll push it down in real good and set that one aside. Now we got our leaf over here, and I'll warm this piece up since it's been setting for a minute. So it's a little more pliable to get down there in that leaf. Okay, just stick it down in there, and then we'll go to pushing it into the nooks and crannies. Just like so. If you've ever been working on a project with screws in it and strip a screw out and don't know how to fix the screw hole, this is a product that you would use for that. You fill that hole back up, and then you can re-drill it. You want it, you know, to get good and hard before you try to re-drill it. But it sets up just like wood. Okay, so we got that mold filled up. Now I had a little piece of this left over, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open my tube up, and I'm going to poke that down in the tube with the rest of that so it don't dry out. All right, now we're not wasting nothing. Now we got this little rose over here. This is the one we started with. Let's see if this will come out of here now without causing a disturbance. Yes, popped right out of there. Look at that. Look at our little rose. Now I'm going to push the sides of it down. That's why I wanted to get it out of there before it's set up hard, and get it flat to my surface. Being careful not to touch the middle of it because I'm not wanting to flatten out the design. I just want to flatten out the back of it so it'll sit nice and flat on the project. And I've got the silicone mat that it's on, so it's not going to stick to this silicone mat. All right. So there's our little rose. Now, let's see if this one's set up enough that I can get it out of there. I don't know. It may need a little longer. I just keep flexing the mold a little bit around it, see if it'll start to come loose from the sides, because I don't want to be plucking at it. If I wasn't doing a video, I'd just leave them sit here for a half hour or so. But for the sake of the video, I'm trying to show you how this comes out of here. And time is not being my friend right now. If it was a little harder, it would pop right out of there. But it does not want to do that right now. So I'm going to have to just let that set up, or I'm going to ruin it trying to get it out of there. Let's say we did this leaf over here on this side, and let's see if it wants to cooperate. Maybe, maybe not. It's starting to firm up. It's starting to pop loose on some of the sides, but not all the way yet. Let's see if you can see that right along the sides there. It's starting to firm up enough that it wants to release from the mold, but it's not set up enough to make it want to come all the way out yet. So we'll have to wait on that. While my molds are setting up here, you take your little tool or your X-Acto knife or whatever, and you clean up your molds. Make sure you get your molds good and clean and get everything out of them. There might be a little residue left behind from the Quikwood, and you don't want that setting up in your molds. It will ruin your molds. So I'll show that part while we're waiting on the other molds to set up here a little more. Get the Quikwood picked out of there. You don't want to cut the mold. You just want to ease these little pieces out. If you see any residue in there, and you can, these molds are really flexible, so you can pull them back and really take a look in the nooks and crannies and make sure you get everything out of them good. If you leave it in there and it hardens, then the next time you put anything in there for an impression, it's not going to take real well because it's got residue left in there that's stifling your mold. We just want to make sure, get down in all those crannies and make sure it's all cleaned out real good. And that mold is looking real good right there. So we got that one cleaned up, and I got a little rose made here that I'm waiting for it to dry. It can sit there to its little heart's content at this point. Let's take another look at our oak leaf. But I'm thinking that as big as that is, it's probably going to take a little bit longer. Now that's not pulling away yet. And let's see about our lizard over here. When I was on the farm, I used to have all kinds of varmints of all descriptions, and somebody brought me a bunch of anole lizards that their kid had, and they didn't want them in the house no more. They're sick and tired of taking care of the anoles, and so I had a tank of anole lizards. They were a lot of fun to mess with. Little bitty boogers though, and fast. Oh my goodness! And if you never had an anole lizard, I'll tell you right now, if you got one, you never want to grab them by the tail, because their tails will come off. That's one of their defense mechanisms. So the doggone tails will come off of them. And they'll grow their tails back, but Lord, they look awful. So if you're trying to catch one, you know, as fast as they are, it's real easy to get one by the tail, and you're left holding the tail and the lizard's gone. And it's starting to pop loose. I'm trying my best not to mess him up. I just keep working the mold a little bit to get him to pop loose from there. And it would be lovely if he would just pop out of there onto the desk, wouldn't it? I think I'm messing him up. He's just a little bit too gummy yet. I'm going to push him back down in there. Let him work a little bit longer. Let him form a little bit more. And I'm going to take my tool and use it like a rolling pin. Just roll down over it, push it down into the mold. And I don't know if that helped it a whole lot, because it wanted to stick to my... It's getting tacky while it's trying to set up, so it's sticking to my tool. Now, come loose there. I don't know. This one's probably going to be a mess because of me messing with it for so much. Yeah, it's going to tear. I see it tearing. Well, we'll go ahead and peel it out of there and see what it looks like, since I've gone this far with it. But yeah, he's tearing. I'm making a mess out of that. Yeah, there's not enough impression there. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it all the way back out of the mold. All the way. Make sure we get the mold cleaned out here. And we'll work that clay just a little bit more. Warm it back up some. Make it pliable. And stretch it out so that it's the length of the mold. And go to pressing it into place. All right, and we'll set that aside. Now let's come back over here and take a look at our oak leaf and see how it's doing. And it's not wanting to pull up yet. It's pretty thick. I mean, you know, comparatively speaking to the other molds, so it's probably going to take the longest to dry. And we got the dragonfly over here. And we'll flex that mold a little bit. It's not wanting to come out of there yet either. It's going to need a little more setting up time. It's kind of poking loose up in the middle, but the sides aren't coming out. Well, maybe. if I keep working it. Just keep flexing the mold till it decides that it wants to cooperate. Ease it up a little bit. Just like when you're baking a cake and you feel around the edge to loosen it up a little bit before you try to pop it out of the pan. That's what I'm doing here. Just ease it up a little bit before it pops out of there. And there she goes. She's peeling loose. And I'll get it down here on the desk. Okay, now we've got it out of the mold. And this is what I meant by getting it trimmed up before you get it out of the mold. Because if this was to set up like this, it would be a bear to try to trim it up. So while it's still damp, hasn't set up all the way, you can come in with your craft knife and do a little fine tuning. It's here on the silicone pad, so it's not going to stick to that. We just come in, trim around the wings. The knife seems to be bent a little bit, so we'll bend her back some. All right, now come in here and trim around the tail. Take that piece off. And do this other side of it. Now, the rest of that can be trimmed up fairly easy with craft knife once it's hard. It's just getting these big chunks off of it are a royal pain when you let them set up all the way. So I'm pretty happy with this at this point. If I go messing with it a whole lot more, I might do more damage to it. So I'm going to let that set up the way it is. See, I might take the knife and go a little closer to that tail. Like that. And like that. And there's our dragonfly. All that can be shaped and scraped once it's completely dry. So there's 2 pieces out of the 5 out of the mold, so you can see what they look like. Gives you an idea. And they can be painted, whatever colors you want to paint them. I think that dragonfly would look cool with some iridescent type paints. Put on the wings and a black body, you know, make it look a little more realistic. Put that on the side of a gourd or on a wood box or jewelry box, bird feeder, you know, whatever kind of project you're working on. If you're doing journals, maybe you want to do a botanical journal, or you want to do a insect journal, a summertime journal. Dragonflies are good in summertime, you know, so that might be an idea. And you embellish it with little dragonflies and ladybugs and whatever you want to put on it. So there you go. There's how this Quikwood is used. And that's what it looks like again. It's wood repair epoxy putty, they call it. And it's made by a company called Polymetric Systems Incorporated. They got it on Amazon, but I got mine off of Miriam Joy. She's running that special right now. So there you have the Quikwood. And I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you liked what I'm doing, give it a thumbs up. Be sure and subscribe. Click the bell so you get alerts when I do shows. And stay informed on what I'm doing here. Share it with your friends. Make sure all your friends know about crafting, and maybe they'll get inspired to be creative as well. That's what we're all about here, is trying to educate people on crafts and supporting other YouTube channels. You know, be sure and leave comments. Sub to everybody that makes comments on my videos, and ask them to sub you back. And let's make a nice YouTube community, and let's be friends. And with that all being said, remember, Brenda's crafty. Be like Brenda.